Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Mac's Power Hour. My name is Chelsea Achampong, the programs coordinator here at Mac, and I'll be serving as your moderator for today's session. Today's Power Hour is powered by Google, and we're grateful for their continued support in helping us bring timely, relevant, and impactful learning opportunities to our entrepreneurial community. Power Hour is designed to connect you directly with industry experts who can share practical insights and tools you can apply immediately to strengthen your business. Today's topic, Q1 2026 HR Compliance Essentials for Small Businesses, is especially important as we head into a new year with evolving workplace regulations and expectations. Before we begin, just a few housekeeping items. Today's session is being recorded and will be shared following the event. Please feel free to drop questions in the chat throughout the presentation. We'll address as many as possible during our Q&A session. It's my pleasure to introduce today's guest presenter, Keele Taylor. Hi, Keele.
Hi, everyone.
Keele is the CEO and Chief Human Resources Officer at HR Minded Consulting Services. Keele is a seasoned HR expert with over 20 years of experience leading human resources strategy across a wide range of industries. She is certified by both SHRM and HRCI and specializes in HR compliance, employee retention, and talent development. She is also an OSHA authorized trainer and a Gallup certified strengths coach. She offers executive coaching and strategic guidance to leaders and organizations nationwide. In addition, she is currently pursuing a PhD in human capital management, reflecting her commitment to shaping the future of work through thoughtful, people-centered practices. Today, Keele will walk us through key HR compliance considerations for small businesses that should be prioritizing this in Q1 of 2026 and how to proactively protect and position your business for growth. Keele, thank you so much for joining us today. I will actually turn it over to you so you can begin your presentation.
Awesome. Thank you, Chelsea. I'm so happy to be here, and thank you, Midlands African Chamber, for having me. I appreciate it. All right, so gonna dive right in. I'm a small business owner. I'm talking to small business owners. I hope you see my slide, Chelsea. Let me know if you can see it. Okay, I see it now. So today, I really want to spend some time exploring the landscape that we're in and the importance of managing our worker classification correctly, our onboarding correctly, and being aware of different risk management practices that will help us to scale our businesses without running into costly litigation. So at my firm, we're an HR compliance and risk management firm, and that is what we largely focus on. How can we solve for employment blind spots so that our clients won't run into costly litigation, being sued and things of that nature? Those things are just not fun at all. So I am going to be presenting what really is more of a 4-hour long training in a very condensed time frame. And so get your notepads out, be ready for some really exciting, I think they're exciting because I love HR, but be ready for some exciting nuggets. So Warren Buffett said it best. It takes 20 years for us to build a reputation and 5 minutes to ruin it. And although 20 years may be an over exaggeration, because you can build a reputation quicker than that, it does take much longer to build that reputation than it does for us to ruin it. So with that being said, it's so much more important for us to realize that when we're building our businesses, this investment that we want to pass along to our family and things of that nature, our legacy, many of us call it, we really do need to put in the effort to protect it. And so that's what we're talking about today. Compliance protects you and your brand while you're trying to scale. And HR is a big piece of that. So you would never build a house without a strong foundation. Why would you do that for your business? Why would we spend time and effort hiring and, building structure to where we can pull in money, but not have a strong foundation in which we can protect? And what that looks like is being aware of local employment laws that we have to enforce within our businesses, being aware of the policies that we need to enforce and follow ourselves as leaders, and then also being aware of the changing risk that the landscape, the administration even will afford to us, so that we can protect ourselves against those different risks. People management is a huge piece of owning a business, scaling a business, right? But do we know properly how to enforce different policies so that people management doesn't become a thorn in the side? One day we think that we're hiring a rock star, the best employee ever, and then something goes wrong, somebody gets mad at us, and they become the worst nightmare. What protections have we put in place to make sure that our business and us as an employer and even other employees at the company are protected against that type of risk, right? So before we dive into the really interesting stuff, because I have some case studies and I'm going to really go in to detail about how to classify your employees, I want to spend a little bit of time up front emphasizing the importance of having the right tools in your toolkit, if you will, while you're building your business. I know that we become, as business owners, we're moving so fast and, we put things on notepads and sticky notes and note to file, or we use spreadsheets a lot, right? I really want to encourage you. It doesn't take a lot of money to just spend time and effort bringing about a little bit of a system. So whether that's Gusto, a lot of people use Gusto. You can use Gusto. It works well for small businesses. As you scale, I want to say try to go to ADP, right? You want to scale your systems as you scale your business, because the more you scale that system, it's going to be more protection for you. So Gusto is great when you're in one state and you have 3 to 5 employees. I'm all for Gusto. As you scale, think about the tax compliance, the IRS compliance, things like that you may not have a lot of time and effort to keep your thumb on. So you really want a system that's going to help you to mitigate the risk along with that. So payroll and classification systems, legal and compliance resources. If you don't have a trusted, dedicated HR person, such as myself or someone inside of your organization, where are you getting your reasonable basis? It is so important that you are not just using Chat GPT to create policies, or you're not just copying someone else's handbook, because that may not be the same culture, it may not be the same industry. There are a lot of variables that come into play when you're creating policy and infrastructure, systems, and things of that nature. So use a trusted source, use the Department of Labor, use SHRM, use different federal agency alerts that will actually send you information. Do the research, or hire a trusted, dedicated resource to help you with the compliance as you scale. I have clients who have anywhere between 0 employees because they want to be proactive in getting those systems and the foundation laid early, which is super smart. 0 on up to 570 at this very moment, right? And those larger companies actually have HR in place, but they need help with certain projects, or the timing is just not there. So they need assistance with the HR compliance piece. Time and labor management, that's another piece. The time tracking, are you just having someone on the honor system give you the hours that they work on a timesheet, a paper timesheet every week, or is that into a Clockify or an ADP or QuickBooks time tracking system? Again, some of these systems are not very costly. So if you have employees, it does it benefits you to start with a system instead of when you get to 7 employees, now you want to implement something. We know that not everybody does great with change, right? So it's so much easier to lay the foundation. Even Goldman Sachs will teach us this. Lay the foundation early, have your systems, think about your systems, try to implement them early before you hire a ton of people, because then you're not working backwards. You have less cleanup to do. If you're always ready, you don't have to get ready, right? So just I'll leave that alone. I could talk on that for 10 more minutes. Conduct regular assessments, check yourself, do your own SWOT analysis, identify your strengths, where your weaknesses are, your opportunities, your threats. Threats would be, am I facing EEOC charges potentially because I don't know what ADA or interactive process is. If somebody has a disability in my team and I don't know how to handle that, that could become a threat for me, opportunities. Maybe I don't have the best handbook at this point. So an opportunity later on would be to continuously build on that handbook. That would be an opportunity. A weakness is that I don't have a handbook at all, but I'm getting ready to hire my first 1 or 2 people. That's a weakness. I can't stress the importance of having policies and having a handbook in place before you hire your first person. People want to know that you have structure. They want to know that this is a real business that they're working for, even if it's a cousin, an aunt, whoever that you're hiring. Because I know how small businesses do at first. They hire who they know. Does that person have a job description? Do they know what is expected of them? And I say, do they know? But it's also, if something goes wrong, because risk mitigation, and they say that, well, that's not my job, or, you're having me do things that I didn't sign up to do. Okay, well, let's pull out the job description and see what we all agree to first and foremost. It helps you to be a better manager. It helps you to be a stronger employer when you have clear policies documented that you can refer back to. All right. Maintaining thorough records. We want to document the employee information. Someone asked me yesterday when I was conducting another webinar, hey, I like to use Google. Can I just store all of the employee files and their personal information in Google? Well, you could, however, there are systems that will actually help you to store that information securely. And I'm talking about securely in the sense that it would be your legal defense if the system gets hacked or something, right? So always think a step or two deeper than, okay, I got a system, but is it secure? And is it one that if something goes wrong, and the employee's like, well, where did you have my personal information on Google? It may not be a secure site, but is that a legal defense for you? Ask yourself those questions during your SWOT analysis. And investing in your culture and your people. Nowadays, sad to say, it's just not enough for us to give someone a paycheck and let them know that this is a stable work environment or whatnot. They're expecting much more. They're expecting us to have our stuff together, our poop in a group, if you will, right? you're taking time to build the infrastructure of the organization, but are you investing in your people? What benefits package are you looking at? And do they know about the benefits that you have? One time during orientation to send them a bunch of documents, but never to talk about it again. People don't remember or recall everything that they hear on day one. It takes consistent training, it takes consistent conversation to let people know that you are, building a world-class organization, somewhere that people want to work. So for what it's worth, repeat those things to them. All right, now let's dive into what we all came here for, which is how to stay safe as we're hiring for our organizations. I am not naive to the fact, because I see it all of the time, that small businesses heavily rely on classifying workers as 1099 independent contractors, right? We all know that that is a thing. However, when you misclassify a worker, and I'm going to show you in just a moment on what you can look at to determine if somebody's an actual W-2 or an actual 1099. So this is a good time to take notes. When you misclassify, if you're ever audited, it's a serious offense. It brings about some violation with costly penalties and back taxes for unpaid employment taxes, unpaid wages, unpaid benefits, things of that nature. It becomes a nightmare. And so knowing how to classify people correctly up front really benefits you and saves you in the long run. These are things you want to work to avoid as an employer. One, I already said, the misclassification between 1099 and W-2. The other is not paying people for working. Oftentimes, someone will say, okay, well, we're getting ready to do the orientation for this person, but can I send them this stuff to look at before they start? No, because that's them working off the clock. They haven't even started their job yet, but you want to send them work to do. That's working off the clock. And this person may be a great individual. You may trust them or whatnot, but the minute you make them mad, or they know that this is a pattern that you do, if they call Department of Labor and they say, oh, well, so-and-so, this so-and-so owning this business, they're working people off the clock. They're not paying them for compensable duties that they're performing. It only takes one person to make one phone call, and then we're risking that reputation that we talked about. And then incorrect overtime calculations, not paying people for the hours that they work. When they're working over 40 hours a week, then they deserve to have time and a half pay, right? Overtime pay. That is a huge violation, and it happens pretty often. So that's where I go back to, what is our system for tracking that? I want a system that I can run reports out of. So if I have to show something one day, here's my reasonable basis, here's my reports, here you go. They don't cost that much money to implement. So here goes a case study where I really illustrate the importance and the difference of 1099 versus W-2. But I also go into the importance of hourly versus salary, because that's a misclassification that happens as well. So we have a company, a small business in New Jersey called Smoothie Central. And what they got caught doing, because someone called Department of Labor and complained on them, they were classifying employees incorrectly. Some of the managers, they were classifying as 1099. Some of them, they were classifying as exempt. And when I say exempt, I mean salaried. So if you have a manager at a smoothie restaurant, and you basically have to tell this manager everything to do step by step, they really don't have a lot of independent judgment and decision making, but we've classified them as salaried. and not hourly, that could become a problem. So we'll get into that in just a moment. But there in red, you will see the financial implications and the impact that this Smoothie Central ran into because they were misclassifying these workers. They ended up having to pay the back wages for, compensation and benefits. That was $75,000. And then there's an agreed upon amount that happens called liquidated damages. So the attorney helped them to get even more money because of the penalty that there was, that lay within, because they were misclassified and they went so long without reasonable pay, or the pay that was afforded to them. So they were able to get additional damages. And then the civil penalties from the IRS or the Department of Labor for those fines that were imposed, that was $20,000. On top of that, you have the court costs, the attorney, the legal fees. So to a tune of $200,000 for a small business, that's something nobody wants at all. So it pays for us to make sure that we're classifying employees the right way and workers the right way, and that we have systems to help us track these things. All right, so I already talked about 1099 W-2. Here is how you spot that you're doing it correctly. I sit in many Department of Labor audits, and what they'll ask me for and the employer for is, okay, if this is a 1099 independent contractor, show me proof that they are that they have multiple clients, that they have a business card, that they supply their own tools and equipment for the job. But first and foremost, that they have a contract. They have a contract where the deliverables, and you've written this contract or they've written this contract and you two have agreed on it, that the deliverables for a set amount of pay are enforced, right? That's what a 1099 contractor is. They have a contract. They bear the financial risk, and they're also providing their own insurances. So when I talk about insurance, I'm talking about workers' comp, liability insurance. They have their own self-employment taxes. Those things need to be in place for us to be able to call someone a 1099 contractor. And that sometimes is a rare thing. The IRS will use 3 factors. They'll use the behavioral control, and what that means is, if I'm a 1099, but you're telling me how to do my job on a regular basis, when to come to work, I have set hours, things of that nature. If you look up under the W-2 section, that's where it says company set schedule and methods. So why are you telling me as a contractor when to do it, how to do it? Right? So already, if you're doing a check, a gut check or a SWOT on yourself, we're already behind the 8 ball. If that contractor works for one employer and you're their main source of income, they no longer look like a contractor. Not during an audit, they don't. They may look like that to you, but trying to convince the Department of Labor auditor, that's going to be hard to do. So I can go into more detail with this. I could talk about this again for multiple hours. Please contact me if you have any questions, because this one is a pretty serious area to get into. The other thing I want to talk about is the Department of Labor duties test that we need to be aware of as small businesses. So this is where we talk about who should be hourly versus who should be salaried. The other terms that you're going to get familiar with salary is exempt, and then with hourly is non-exempt. Okay, so if I am a manager and I make less than $35,568 a year, and I don't have any independent judgment to make. I'm not directing the work of anyone, but my title just says manager, I should not be salaried. And I have to pause because that has to sink in a little bit. If you look below at the HR minded tip, when you run the duties test on who is going to be salaried or hourly, this is super important. That person needs to be making at least $35,568 a year to be called salaried, and they have to fall into one of these buckets. They have to fall into number 1, 2, or 3. It's not just making the $35,568 a year that makes them exempt or salaried. It's that they also have to be an executive exemption, an administrative exemption, or professional exemption. So that means that they have to be directing the work of other employees. They have to have the authority to hire or fire. They have to have one of those bullet points in number 1, or they have to have one of the bullet points in number 2. They have to be able to exercise discretion of independent judgment or on significant matters, and non-manual work directed, so office or non-manual work. And then number 3, if they don't meet number 1 and number 2, they're not exempt. But if they meet number 3, maybe their knowledge is in a specialized field. Maybe they're a lawyer, a doctor, or teacher, and they're making at least $35,568 a year. Now you can call them a salaried employee. And I know, because I've been doing this since 2005, I know why managers or business owners will say, no, let's make them salaried. It's because they don't want to do the timesheets. They don't want to do the timesheets, and they want to be able to work people as many hours as they can without having to worry about overtime. But I know that, and also Department of Labor knows that. And that's why Department of Labor will audit you to figure out if you're classifying your employees correctly, because they want to make sure we're not taking advantage of employees. We're not keeping them from having overtime, and we're not paying them incorrectly. That's the why for all of this. So again, please check how we're classifying employees out there. Super important. The way in which you stay on top of a compliance with HR is you make sure that your managers also know. So if you move this responsibility onto other people, please don't move this responsibility onto them without training them properly of the same information that I'm telling you right now. Please help them to understand the significance and importance of having sound payroll records, good tracking systems, being able to run those reports and see, are we paying people correctly for their overtime? Do we have people classified the correct way? Help them to understand the importance of enforcing the policies that we wrote, because if we're spending time downloading policies from ChatGPT or copying them from people, but we're not even following the policies that we are printing off, they become a liability for you, right? So that's why, another reason why I say, create your policies in a different way if you can. Don't copy and paste, and really put some time and effort and thought into the way you're writing things. Make them easy for people to understand. Make sure that they follow the state, local, and federal law of the state that you're in, and train people on them. Don't just put them in a handbook, give that document to them in orientation and say, sign here, and that's it. Spend time going through the policies with them. It may not be verbatim, but at least highlight the significance of each one of them and check their understanding, because these are the same policies that when people make wrong decisions or wrong judgments or bad behavior shows up, You need to bring these policies back and say, hey, we went over this. Let's do it again. But I don't understand where the misunderstanding is. Tell me what you didn't understand when we went through this. So it helps you to be a better manager and leader, preferably, and coach, preferably, when you can say, hey, we talked about this. And then when you can feel when, you can smell smoke, right? But then when you see the actual fire, that's not the time for you to fake that you know how to do this. Like you like you got this compliance thing down. That's when you call an HR expert, or you call a legal and employment law attorney, and you get help, because your business could be at risk at that point. Okay, so retaliation is on the rise. It's been pretty high for the last 2 to 3 years. And some of the reason is because we don't do the things that I just went over. We don't talk to people about policies. We don't have policies or enforce them. And so all of a sudden, when they do something wrong, now we want to talk about, oh, well, you weren't supposed to do that, and it says it right here. So now people might feel like, oh, well, you're treating me differently, or you're coming at me some kind of way because of my color, or because I got frequent migraines and I'm disabled, or I'm pregnant. Or that's when they throw these things at you and they say you're retaliating against me, when most of the time it's not the case. It's because you're trying to enforce what you never set as an expectation. That's how that backfires. With the Age Discrimination in Employment Act, someone over the age of 40 who has struggled to get a job because maybe they feel like they are older, and that's not what the today's workforce they feel is looking for. There's people out there that feel that way. And so now you want to come and bring some policies to them that they never saw when you hired them. They may say, oh, you're treating me this way because I'm over 40, but the rest of your workplace is like 20 and younger, or whatever the case may be. All I'm saying is we don't want to allow the opportunity for people to think that we're retaliating against them because we're trying to enforce things when we never set the expectation to begin with. That's what I'm getting at. OSHA. So some people will tell me when they're in like a workplace of 2 to 5 or whatnot, I don't have to worry about OSHA. Well, you do have to worry about OSHA, because if somebody loses an eye or is hospitalized or they have a death in your workplace because your workplace is full of violations, now you are in violation of OSHA, and you do have to worry about that. So a lot of these laws you want to have respect for and try to implement, even if you are below a certain number of employees. Because if you are thinking about scaling and getting to a certain number, it's so much easier to enforce these things now with your current population, current employees, than to have to go back later on and say, hey, by the way, we're enforcing this. And now people feel like, oh, well, this isn't the workplace that it used to be, or I don't like these new rules, or I don't want to work here anymore. It happens all the time. I promise you it happens. ERISA is regarding benefits. And so with small businesses, what I've seen there is that, maybe the CEO has a 401k plan, but these other employees that they hire, they're not affording them the opportunity to have benefits. That right there is a compliance issue as well. So look into how to properly organize your benefits plans when you start to implement them. We talked a lot about retaliation, anti-retaliation. Best practices for that is to make sure you document the process, right? The investigation and whatnot. Again, when there's smoke, soon there will be fire. If you're seeing behaviors in your workplace that are triggering some type of alarm for you and they're not going away and you've seen a pattern, but you've not documented anything, what are we waiting for? The dumpster fire to break loose? No. We want to document those things as we see and smell the smoke, right? And so that will help us to prevent the retaliation situations. Talking about handbook policies again, clear written policies that people know about. I don't ever want to refer to the Bible or to the handbook as a Bible because it's not a Bible. However, it definitely is the one-stop shop for employee information that your team should know that they can go to when they need to reference something, when they need to know how we're going to go about a certain, situation. There should be some good information in there for them to be able to follow for the organization. It should be to the point to where it's part of your culture and you can say, hey, well, let me consult the handbook for that. Or, we every time there's an update, we want to make sure that you know what the update is. Let's go over the handbook together. It should not be this thing that sits in the bottom of the desk drawer and collects dust. Because here's why. The first time that something shakes loose and you need to call for legal advice from an employment law attorney, I promise you they're going to ask you, where's your handbook? They're going to want to know what policies are being enforced and where did the employee sign off on the handbook? And I've been with enough clients to know how it feels for that business owner when the answer is like, dang, we never had them sign it, or we don't have one. And I'm not trying to shame anyone at all, but now that we have this information, when you know better, you do better. So, and we can definitely do better than printing that off on ChatGPT. But if that's all you have for the moment, at least start there. We talked about ensure consistent policy enforcement. Documentation, what I want to highlight here is that there are forms for just about everything. Make sure you're using, specific forms for your investigations, whether you have to pull them off of a site, um, and use them consistently, right? So not everybody, one form shouldn't be used for somebody for a situation and then another form for a different person. Have some consistency in your forms for corrective actions, for any of those policy violations, and keep track of, when so and so had theft of time. This is the process and the corrective action that we took with so and so. So now that Keele has the same violation, I want to follow suit. I want to have the same process and use the same forms for Keele, right? You want to treat everyone the same, because if you don't, then they can come back and say, well, they didn't do that to so and so, so I feel like they're retaliating against me or treating me differently. This all stems from onboarding best practices, right? So I constantly running into um, work sites that have 5 or more employees already before they have any job descriptions. They don't have any standard offer letter that they've ever given the employee. There's literally, the cupboards are bare, so there's nothing in the employee file. And so we don't want that. We want to, when I say get your systems created and in place, also prepare the forms. When you're thinking about hiring different positions, before you do that, create your forms that you're going to need. The job description is one of them, the handbook, get those policies together, create your offer letter, brand it even. It really is a reflection of your business. When you have this really nice welcome package for your new hire, it's part of your brand. It sends a clear message that I'm prepared for you. I have my stuff in order. Don't think that you're going to catch me slipping on anything. Um, it really does help your legal defense later on. The I-9, I could do a class on the I-9 for 2 hours and probably still have content. What I would like to do is ask for everyone to put this down as homework. Download an I-9 off of the Department of Labor.gov website and read that form. That's one of the scariest employment forms that you will ever be responsible for. And I say responsible because if you are hiring people, you're responsible. And there's words on there such as perjury that you need to be aware of. You also want to know when to complete certain sections of that form. So that new hire, that section 1 should be completed either before or on the date of their first day, not after that. The section 2 for you to, verify their documents, that needs to be completed within 3 business days of you hiring that individual. And those dates on that form definitely matter, especially when it comes to audits that you may come across as a business owner. All of that information is super important, along with the classification being correct of that worker. Day 1 orientation, spend time going over the handbook, spend time going over any type of safety protocols that you need them to know about, even if they're in a remote work environment. If somebody is walking down the stairs and they're holding their computer, they're on a call, they trip and fall down those stairs, even though they're remote, that could be a workers' comp situation for you. And a lot of employers don't understand that someone working at home has just as many possible safety violations or risk that they could have in the workplace. And there's things that are less controllable for you because they're not sitting there in a workplace that you provided them, right? So it does pay to talk to them about those things, or to put those things in your handbook and say, hey, when you're working remote, whether it's at a coffee shop, wherever, we expect this to be your behavior. Always operate in awareness, safety, in the protection of the information that you're speaking of regarding the company. If you're on a webinar or a conference call in a public place, that's our company information that could be shared within earshot. That may not be something that you want. So those are things that you would want to put in the handbook, along with that confidentiality agreement. So, regular check-ins, again, that will help you to really mitigate different risks that can come up with employee behaviors, performance situations. Staying in constant contact with your employees, whether it's remote, on-site, or hybrid, is so important. And a lot of the clients that I work with choose to have a 90-day assessment period, or a 90-day introductory period, or even a 90-day probationary period. You can use those 3 terms to identify how you want to describe that 90-day period. But don't have that if you're not going to do check-ins with that individual. Like, don't say, well, you have a 90-day introductory or assessment period, and the minute you hire them, they don't see you again for, after 90 days. That's your time to really spend time with them to see if this is a good fit, if there's anything that we can change. And since we're in an at-will environment, at-will state in the state of Nebraska, use that to your advantage to see, is this the right hire even? So that's all that I have prepared today. Again, a lot of the information I touched on could be at least an hour or 2 long of a conversation by themselves, but I appreciate you all having me on, and I hope to come back.
Yes, thank you so much, Keely, for that insightful presentation. We'll now transition into our Q&A portion. Let's see if there are any questions from the chat. I think they're still coming in, so I'll go ahead and start with my own. Can you tell us how small businesses should handle compliance when they operate in multiple states with different employment laws, especially when it's relevant for remote teams or expanding companies?
Yes. So what you want to do is be aware of the state laws for each one of those states, the employment laws for each one of those states. And when I talk about the employment laws, look at look at the timekeeping, the breaks, um, lunch periods, things of that nature. Look at policies regarding um, conduct in the workplace and how to handle those. But if it's multiple states, it's easiest to go with the state that is the most employer or employee, um, not friendly, but protective, employee protective state. So if California is one of your states that you have business in, so you say you have California, Nebraska, Ohio, whatever, California is going to be the leader of the most employee protective state. That's how you want to do that.
Yes, thank you so much. That's important to note that you want to go with the most employer friendly, employer minded
Employee,
state.
yeah, employee protective state.
Employee. Yes, thank you
Yes.
for that correction. Thank you,
Mm-hmm.
employee. Yes, thank you. My next question is what are the warning signs that a business may already be at risk for an FLSA audit or Department of Labor investigation?
So the slide that I showed, the two columns where here, I'll go back to that right here. So the sign that you may already be in an FLSA violation is if you are treating a 1099 contractor as a W-2. That 1099 contractor has no contract, they have no other clients, they are using your laptop and all of the equipment that you provided. We're in violation already of FLSA. So that's how you'll know um, to answer your question if you're in violation, because you look at these two columns and quickly can identify um, who's coded or classified correctly.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Keely, on that. Definitely want to make sure you have that differentiation between a 1099 independent contractor and a W 2 employee. Thank you for answering that question. Um, my next question actually relates to the classification of employees. So, if a company discovers it has misclassified workers, what are some of the immediate corrective steps so that they can reduce liability?
Sure. I see this a lot, and the verbiage is the big thing, right? You've been doing this for how long, and now you have to correct the situation. And so employers are like, well, how do I even say that? You call the person in and you say, with the changing environment and compliance and administration, we really want to make sure that we're tightening up and cleaning up various steps of the employment phase. And what we've noticed is that we need to get some contracts in place. Here's a contract that we've created. We want to keep you as a 1099 independent contractor. That's going to look a little bit different. We want to give you time to, get your own laptop. We like to know if you have other clients. Do you have business cards? Walk them through that process on correcting the situation. but at all costs, don't continue to do what's against FLSA, especially when you know the right thing to do. So to answer your question is simply identifying what is wrong and then just having the courage and the verbiage to use to say it's 2026. We're moving into a new direction. We're tightening up on our compliance because in today's day and age, it's a very litigious environment, and we want to make sure that as we scale our business, we are protected. You're protected as a worker, and I'm protected as an employer.
Yes, thank you so much for walking us through those corrective steps. Um, I have a next question, and it's about HR documentation. So, how long should small businesses retain HR documentation such as payroll records, investigation notes, I-9 forms, and accommodation records?
Okay. So this is a fun one, and there are resources out there that I want you to go and download or print off. Go to SHRM, Society Human Resource Management.org, I believe, and search for a retention schedule. You can even get one of these off of the internet because every document just about that has to do with HR compliance has a different retention schedule, right? And so you said I-9. The I-9, after someone terminates from that organization, you want to hold on to that for at least 1 year, right? Um, for payroll taxes, and payroll information. That's anywhere from 3 to 4 years after they leave the company. Um, Timesheets has their own retention schedule. Um, what was the other thing that you had asked? Investigation notes, right? Okay, so think about it this way. When someone terminates from the company, they have so long for the statute of limitations to go file some complaint or get an attorney to fight something, right? You don't want to get rid of those investigation notes the minute that they leave because something might come and surprise you later on. So save those for at least 1 year after they go. Now, I will be honest, as an HR professional doing this for over 20 years, I've held on to things. So like that I-9, I tend to hold on to that for at least 3 years after they term. Um, but again, there are requirements out there that you should follow that are written, and just make sure you have that downloaded and in your toolkit to reference.
Yes, thank you so much for answering that question. Definitely making sure that everything is documented and stored properly is very important. I think we have time for one last question. Let's talk about the growth stage. So, at what stage of growth should a small business transition from DIY HR, do it yourself HR, using ChatGPT to create some of these policies? How do you transition from that to hiring an HR consultant or
Mhm.
an internal HR professional?
Okay, so this is not a one size answer that fits all, right? Because companies are of every industry. So I can't say that at a certain employee count, every small employer should have an HR professional and stop doing it yourself. It's going to depend on what the industry is, how litigious the industry could be. That can help you decide, because that HR professional should be your, oh, I don't want to say watchdog, but definitely guiding light, beacon of best practices, helping you to remain compliant and to protect your organization. And so it's not an easy answer that I can apply to all. I will say that again, I have clients that have 0 to upwards of the past 500. And so um, I know that myself as a business owner would want to have HR advisement before I start to hire. And I really appreciate and applaud those clients that come to me when they're like, okay, I don't want to guess at this. I want to do it the right way. And I care about my business. I know it's going to scale. And so help me lay a strong foundation. I don't want to use ChatGPT and guess about this because we realize that some of the stuff we get from ChatGPT, some of it can be incorrect or dated. And then some of it, it's only as good as the information you put in. And if you don't know the right answers, how are you best going to discern if that's appropriate for use? So that's what I see us running into sometimes with ChatGPT. I'm not speaking against it. I know that, I mean, I've created AI employees. That's even a thing that they taught us in California. I can create a whole AI employee org chart, but I'm not spending my time doing that. It's like the things that we can do just because the tool is there. How can we best use it so that it doesn't backfire on us? Because if someone asks you, why did you do it this way? Or what did you use? And you point to, well, I got it from ChatGPT. That's not a legal defense. That's not listed as a trusted source right now in a courtroom or anywhere else. And so um yeah, just for whatever that's worth, think through where we're getting our information from and how can we validate it, to make sure that we can actually use it if we ever get into any legal issues.
Yes, definitely making sure that we know the source of these policies that we are creating. Thank you so much for answering that question.
Absolutely.
Keely, thank you again for sharing your expertise with us today. Your insights on HR compliance and people strategy were incredibly valuable, and we really do appreciate your time that you've spent with us and the knowledge you've shared. So before we wrap up, yes, please, everyone, if you're looking to understand HR better, you have Keely's contact information up on the screen. So please make sure that you screenshot or save it. Like I said, before we wrap up, I do have a few brief announcements. So Mac's upcoming Suit Up event is Saturday, March 14th from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. at Girls Inc. of Omaha. This event is a career readiness and professional development event, and it's designed to equip participants with the tools, confidence, and professional polish needed to succeed in today's workforce. To learn more and register, please visit fundmac.org to register. And our next Power Hour will actually take place on Thursday, March 19th from 5:30 to 6:30 p.m. and will be streamed again on Facebook Live. So be sure to stay tuned for more details on the guest presenter and session topic, which will be shared soon. So everybody, thank you to our audience. Thank you, Keely, for joining us for this Power Hour Business Development virtual live stream presented by Google. To learn more about the Midlands African Chamber and upcoming programs, please visit us at midlandsafricanchamber.com. Have a great evening, and remember, stay informed, get inspired. Bye, everybody.
Thank you, Chelsea. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Keely. Bye.